In this lesson, we'll talk about importing geometry into Mudbox. So to start working in Mudbox, we need to have some geometry, an object to work from, a base piece of geometry. And we looked at creating base pieces here in the Mudbox starting points, and those can be great for practice and for some limited number of projects that you may want to start from. But in most cases, you'll want to create your own custom base geometry to begin to work from. So in order to facilitate that, you'll probably be using another application and then transferring that geometry in. Now, there are a number of ways that we can get this geometry into our scenes. One of the quickest ways would be to use this send to feature. And so let's take a look at how that works. So I'm just going to jump into Maya really quickly and show you this as an example. And this works with 3ds Max or Softimage as well. But let's say that I want to transfer some geometry in here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a polygon. Let's just create a sphere. And just for illustration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and take some of the edges on the bottom of this sphere and just delete those, just so that we have a variety of polygon faces here. So we've got a bunch of quads, we've got some triangles on top, we have a big n-gon at the bottom. And so what we'd want to do here, now that we've got our base created, and we'll do this as we go through a project, but I just want to show you here with a simple example. We'll take our piece of geometry, we'll go to File, and you'll see the same kind of options here in these other applications that you'll see in Mudbox. So here, we're going to be sending to Mudbox. So we're kind of pushing this out to Mudbox. We can send it as a new scene, we can update the current scene, or we can add to current scene. And we want to go ahead and send this as a new scene. So we'll click on Send as New Scene. Now you'll see it automatically brought me back here to Mudbox, and it brought up this window. And this is what's going to happen as Mudbox goes through and looks at the geometry that you're bringing in and kind of decides, is this geometry going to be sculptable? Is it okay? Are there some issues maybe with the model? And it's going to bring those up to you. So the first one that it's telling us is that there's a high valence vertex. That's basically a point or a pole on our mesh where a lot of different edges are coming into a single point. And it's giving you a little warning. It's saying it has more than 16 adjacent edges. You can use it, but if you use it for map extraction with smoothing turned on, there'll be artifacts. And so it's giving you kind of a warning saying you can use this, it's fine, it'll work, but you may have these issues once you get down the road. Also, too many sides to a face, so it's looking at this n-gon that we had on the bottom and saying it's got too many edges, and it's not going to subdivide properly, and you're going to see artifacts. So again, it'll bring it in, but it's giving you an indication that you might want to fix that if you want optimal results. And finally, it's going to tell you that you have UV faces crossing tile boundaries. So your UVs you want to only be in this 0 to 1 space, and you don't want them to cross boundaries. You can have multiple tiles, you just don't want them to cross the boundaries. So in this case, you can say, okay, you know what, I would really like to delete this mesh because I don't really want this. Or I can keep all, okay, and that if you're bringing multiple meshes in, it will kind of keep everything. Or you can keep this particular mesh and then continue on if you have multiple meshes, importing those. You can also click Help if you want information on the actual problems themselves. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and say keep this mesh. And here you can see it came in and it has a little red dot in some of those areas. And this is just an indicator that those are where those errors were. If we go into Display, you can see this Mesh Errors checkbox. If we turn that off, that's going to turn off those little red dots that occur. Okay, just again, an indication. If I turn this back on, it's going to bring up that window once again. All right, now one thing you'll notice is this sphere is super tiny. And that's kind of a difference in the grid size, because in Maya it's actually very small as well. This is a 1 centimeter sphere, a radius of 1 centimeter. It just happens that the grid happens to be very small. And so it looks like the scale doesn't quite match in Mudbox, but what we really want to do is create something that is the size that we want to work with. So we want to have a 60 centimeter radius on this, and then we can go ahead and send that back over. So let me just update the scene. So I'll say keep. And now you can see that it's a little bit bigger. And so typically when you're working in Maya, you want to work to a sort of realistic dimension. You can modify your grid size if you want. And if you're just working on something very small in the grid, you want to just make sure to size it up appropriately before you import it in. All right. Now, what we can also do is create OBJ files. So from any application, Maya, Softimage, 3ds Max, you could choose to export your model. So I'll just export this as test, and we'll make this an OBJ file. It's kind of the basic standard 3D mesh that you can, it's pretty universal across all kinds of applications. So you can see it exported that out. So now going back into Mudbox, it's very easy to come in and say import and go into our project files. You can see here's the test OBJ, and we can just import this in. It gives us a similar warning. We'll go ahead and keep it. And now we've got that mesh imported in. And so depending on the application that you're using, if you want to use those send to features from the Autodesk applications, you can certainly use those. You can also, if you're using another application or you just want to have do it a different way, you could export the OBJ and then import it into Mudbox. Okay, and then you can go into your UV view. You can see the UVs here, and so I can see that the reason that it's saying that is that it's right on the border, and so you would want to come in and modify those UVs so that they fit inside of this square versus actually touching the edges of it. And so you want to make sure to do that. Again, you can create multiple tiles. They just need to be located within each tile and not touching the edges. Okay, so again, importing, exporting OBJs or using the send to feature will allow you to get geometry back and forth out of into Mudbox rather, and it works both ways too. So just real quickly here, if I were to come in and kind of modify this, let me kind of delete this one and kind of start modifying this one, maybe kind of modify this a little bit. You could send this back to Maya, so we could go ahead and send that back. And I think we'll try to update. Yeah, I think that was named differently, but you can see it here. It actually added that back into our scene. So we can go back and forth. So, okay, now I'm going to modify something here in Maya. So I'm going to pull these out. And I'll take this and let's send to Mudbox. Let's update current scene. All right. And now we've got an updated version here. If I can move this again, so kind of pull this front piece down and send it back. Again, we're updating, so it's updating the actual geometry, assuming the name's the same. So update current scene, and now you can see it's been updated. So a really nice connection between those two, which will become important as we start to work back and forth with different applications. All right, so the next thing that we want to look at is, let's take a look at a couple of new features in Mudbox 2014. We'll talk about different ways of actually creating geometry. So Mudbox is getting a little bit better at actually making its own geometry. So usually you have to bring in external pieces of geometry to work with, but we can actually do a few things to create our own pieces of geometry from existing pieces. So we'll take a look at some of those options in the next lesson.